Hello and welcome to Catholic Cinema Crusade. My name is Nick Olzik, Violet Olzik. My wonderful wife is our producer. This is October 24th, 2023. You're listening to episode 10 on the streaming service Bentkey. Hope you have a great listen. Alright, let's start with a prayer. In the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit, Amen. Dear Lord, thank you for this opportunity to come together to talk about a brand new streaming service. I pray that it brings light to this world and it helps children in their curiosity and their discovery, and through the prayers of Venerable Fulton Sheen and all who help with new media, help us to have a great talk. All right, so this is kind of a Catholic Cinema Crusade first. We're not doing a television show or a movie. We are actually doing an entire streaming service. It's not every day that a brand new streaming service premieres. But this week saw the premiere of Bentkey, which had been in the works for about a year and a half from the much larger media conglomerate, the Daily Wire. And in his announcement, Jeremy Boring, who is the co-CEO of the Daily Wire, specifically announced it as the 100th anniversary of the founding of the Walt Disney Company. He wanted this to be like Disney, to be a media conglomerate that was specifically looking at children. And unlike the Daily Wire, which is primarily political and cultural commentary, he wanted this to be purely entertainment, something to inspire wonder and curiosity, not something that catered to politics. And so they decided to launch it as its own app, separate from the Daily Wire. So what I'd like to first do is just kind of go over kids' programming in general. Now, when I was a kid, there were basically, so this is the 90s and early 2000s, there were basically three, I guess you would call it, spheres of children's entertainment. There was kind of the preschool feelings, getting to know you entertainment. There was the elementary school learning entertainment. And then there was the older kids kind of off-brand humor, fun, exciting adventure entertainment. And the three shows in my childhood that really typified this were, for the preschoolers, it was Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. For the elementary age schoolers, it was Sesame Street. And then for the kind of older elementary school kids, it was Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, or Ninja Turtles, or X-Men, or The Adventures of Batman, a whole host of kind of this adventure-themed programming. Now, right from the very beginning, Jeremy Boring said that one of the main reasons he was doing this was as an alternative to the mainstream children's entertainment of today. That the entertainment of today had become very focused on socio-political issues and not very focused on simply wonder and excitement and learning how to be a good person. The one key he took from especially was the direction the Walt Disney Corporation has been taking. Now, I've written about this extensively on my blog, but for those who aren't sure, they've really been leaning hard into politically progressive values over the last year and a half. Now, they've been kind of moving that direction for the last decade, but they've been doing it much more explicitly in the last year and a half to 2 years. And this has troubled a lot of parents, especially parents who initially got Disney Plus, thinking that this would be a great avenue for entertainment for the children. And now when you go to Disney Plus, right in the very start, you see things that are organized by race, you see things that are organized by sexual orientation, and that's specifically for children. That's not even for the kind of all ages access. So, as kind of a reaction against that, this media company was formed. So it's been a long time waiting. It was announced about a year and a half that they were investing $100 million into this adventure, this enterprise. And we were told about one show, which we'll get to later, called Chip Chillip, but we weren't really told much about it. And then last week they had their big premiere where they went through a bunch of the shows and they announced their first live-action film, which was kind of an adaptation of Snow White, again, kind of competing with Disney's upcoming 2024 live-action Snow White. And so now we have the programming, and it's really interesting to me to look at this programming. The people over at Bentkey clearly did their homework, because you see all these three spheres very much filled out, all right? You have in the Mr. Rogers sphere, you have a show called Maple McLay. In the kind of elementary school phase, you have a Sesame Street knockoff. You have a bunch of different shows about learning. And then in kind of the more adventure-y side, you have shows like How Ridiculous and Kid Explorer. So they've clearly had kind of a full gamut. They very much want this to be, like Disney Plus, something that appeals to a wide bracket of children, both boys and girls, preschool, elementary school, older elementary school, and even things that, are family-oriented, that the whole parents can enjoy. So rather than start with me explaining what I really like and what I think they need to work on, I'm going to start with each of my kids. So I got 3 kids who are going to give you their 3 favorite shows on Bentkey, now that as a family we've had like a week and a half to go through some of its content. So let's start with them. We have Nick Jr., my oldest, who is 10. We have Nathan, who is 8. And we have Emily, who is 5. So let's hear their picks.
I obviously like, well, it's not really a Bentkey original, but I like the How Ridiculous thing that they put on, because they're always doing crazy stuff. Like the first episode, they tried to break a bunch of sheets of bulletproof glass. In another episode, they hit a bunch of stuff with a 250 kilometer per hour baseball bat helicopter. And so that was probably my favorite.
Chipchilla, because it has my favorite story, Frankenstein, which is an episode of where they make Frankenstein, is where they talk about Frankenstein and of how he's famous. Like, he's got so many books, cartoons, and movies stuff. And that's why I like Chipchilla.
My favorite is the Chipchilla because it has so many fun episodes.
Alright, so now you've had their explanation of what they think is best. And to be honest, anything that I say in this review is going to pale in comparison to what they experience, because this is really for them. And they've had, overall, a very positive experience. They always want to watch it. They're excited by the programming. They're excited for the new shows that come out every Saturday morning. So clearly it gets an A+ rating from them. And if all you want is, is this going to be good for my kids, that takeaway should tell you that. I want to dive a little bit deeper into the 2 programs that Bentkey is making their kind of bread and butter. So they've included a vast library of shows that have already existed, but they are now distributing. This was true of other streaming services as well. So, for example, my son's favorite show, How Ridiculous, has been on YouTube for quite a few years, but now you can watch it ad-free and you can watch it all in one place. But the 2 shows they are really promoting, these are shows that are Bentkey originals. So when they made the announcement, that's when they decided to make these shows. They were developed through Daily Wire and their associates. They were cast. They were funded. These are truly Bentkey shows. And they fill 2 of the niches that I talked about. The first, which is very much their version of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, is The Adventures of Mabel McLay. So this is a woman who named Mabel, who played by the actress Katie Chase, who essentially is a stand-in Mr. Rogers. She greets the audience in very calm tones. She talks about what they're going to do that day. And then there's a series of activities. There's a book they sometimes read along with. There's a person that they meet, like a banjo player, and so he talks about his banjo and how he learned to be a musician. There's a few puppets that she interacts with. But it's all done in almost one continuous take. So when she walks from like one room to another, the camera follows. There's kind of an imaginary world, like the world of make-believe. It's all done very slow. It's done very deliberately. There's a lot of eye contact. And I was actually rather impressed, because we haven't had a show like that in quite a while, okay? I'm of the opinion that there's really never going to be a show like Mr. Rogers again. It will remain, even 100 years from now, the best show for kind of the pre-K era student. Mostly because of Mr. Rogers himself, who was not only a very talented educator who got his PhD and knew his stuff, but was also a Presbyterian minister who clearly loved children and wanted them to grow up with the love of God. And you get a lot of that from this show. Now, there is a kind of spin-off of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood on PBS right now called Daniel's Tiger's Neighborhood, which is a very good show, I think, in general, and kind of fits in that age bracket, but it doesn't do the same thing that Mr. Rogers did. It wasn't live action. It doesn't have kind of that person-to-person feel. It's much more kind of like a Bluey light where you have Daniel and his various adventures and things he learns. And it's a fine show. I actually really enjoy it, and so do my kids. But I think this really fills that niche that wasn't there before. The second show, and in fact what they're really kind of promoting as their main show, is a show called Chipchilla. Now, this is a family of homeschool chinchillas, which are these little furry critters that are kind of a cross between a mouse and a squirrel from Central and South America. And, they're homeschooled, so they have the mom, the dad, and then they have 3 kids. It's a very much kind of a Simpson-esque demographic as far as the family, though obviously not with the same values as the Simpsons. And then they have like these adventures at home where especially the mom and the dad kind of lead them on activities and they learn things because they're homeschooled. Now, I noticed right away, and I was certainly not the first person to notice this, but there's definitely a Bluey vibe here. I mean, Bluey is, in my humble opinion, the single best children's show on television and one of the best shows in general that's on television right now. It's absolutely spectacular. And it's hard not to see the similarities. You have this brightly colored group of furry animal anthropomorphic characters. You have the dad and the mom who are very, very involved in their kids' lives, in their play, in their discovery. The color palette looks similar. The animation style looks a little similar. Even like the intro music where it goes through each of the characters sounds awfully similar to the Bluey intro. But I don't think it's a straight plagiarism or knockoff. I don't think it came out of a vacuum either. Bluey is such a good show that for decades we're going to see shows that look like Bluey because it's created a model that has worked so well. In the same way, after The Simpsons, you saw Family Guy, and you saw The Cleveland Show, and you saw Dinosaurs, and you saw all of these kind of nuclear family-esque shows. I think you're going to see Bluey influences, and this is kind of the first great Bluey influence to come out of that. But even apart from Bluey, it's a really good show. It has a great family dynamic. One of the things I really love about it is, unlike Bluey, there's a baby, and the baby is part of the play. The baby is involved, the baby is there, the kids interact with the baby, and the kids interact around the house, too. And this is something that also made Bluey really good. They're picking up their toys, they're helping cook the meals. The family is very integrated, okay? People like to stereotype the nuclear family sometimes as stratified, like, oh, the mom only cooks, and the dad only works, and the older kid does this, and the daughter does this. But genuine families who are really close, who hold, for lack of a better term, conservative values, you find so much crossover. I mean, whether it's the dad helping out the diaper while the mom is doing homework with the child, and then someone else is doing chores, while the daughter is doing karate moves in the other room. I mean, there's so much crossover in a real dynamic, loving family that I really like how they portrayed that. The animation style is good. The messaging is definitely meant to cater to kind of Central Americana as opposed to like Australia. But that's something I really like. Bluey is definitively Australian, but with universal values. Chipchilla is definitively American, but with universal values. So they'll talk about the history of the United States, and they'll talk about George Washington, and they'll talk about Neil Armstrong, and they'll talk about things that a homeschool child will need to know as part of their history or part of their science or things like that, but which gets shared with the outside world. One thing I also thought was really intriguing is, even though the Daily Wire and Bentkey are setting themselves up as wanting to be mainstream, wholesome family entertainment, not specifically conservative, it's hard not to see those influences. So, for example, the main voice actor of the dad, kind of the bandit character, if you will, is voiced by Rob Schneider, who is kind of infamous as being a SNL comic actor who became very conservative in his later years and is known for his conservative messages on X and things like that. So too, the mom, whose name escapes me, was a very prominent Broadway actress, kind of an up-and-coming star, and then when she decided not to get the COVID vaccine, she was fired from her play and kind of moved out of the mainstream and now is coming back, but again, on Bentkey. But I think you'll see a lot of that as unfortunately our society becomes more and more polarized, and there's less and less space for people of opposite opinions to have space together, you're going to see spaces open up for talent to go when it's been ostracized from other places. Now, I'm hoping that eventually that kind of passes away and we can see more openness to people of different political stripes working together, but at the very least, you have a place here where people who can't find work other places aren't necessarily faced with the same challenges. And so that's, really nice to see as well. Now, it's not perfect, okay? I like Chip Chilla a lot, but it doesn't have the profoundness, the deep emotionality that Bluey has. But again, it's still in its first season. It's still in its infancy. Same with McClay. McClay is really good. It does a good job with what it does, but it doesn't have the same kind of warmth and personality that Mr. Rogers has. And a lot of the shows, which again they picked up for distribution because they wanted to have a lot of content, are just kind of middle tier. Another show that Nathan, my son, really likes is called Yeti Time, which is kind of this Reading Rainbow-esque thing where a Yeti doll reads a book. And it's fun, but it's very kind of simplistic and not especially interesting, especially for an older audience. And a lot of shows there's really no bad shows on Bentkey. There's a lot of middle tier and high middle tier shows. I have yet to see a breakout hit. Now that might become Chip Chiller or something else, but really time will tell. We're just going to have to wait and see as more content is added whether this really becomes a huge player in the main scene. If I was a betting man, I would say yes. I would say that this is a really strong start. It's really good programming. Everybody who's actually watched it, who's a child, has been entertained by it and has liked the programming. Really, the only negative reviews I've seen have been kind of from large-scale cultural commentators who are a little weary of, the Daily Wire venturing into kids' entertainment. But honestly, for a lot of parents, that's a huge relief. I can turn on Bentkey and not worry if they're watching a show that I haven't seen yet. That's the best thing about it. I can't do that with Disney+. I can't do that with Netflix. I can't do that with Amazon Prime. I certainly can't do that with Max or Hulu or something else like that. There's good programming on all those streaming services, but you always have to take it with an ear of caution. Bentkey, you can just let it go. You know that you're getting good quality with values that resonate with you, and you're not going to have to worry about them getting kind of all this extra political stuff. Just good, wholesome values, good content that everybody can celebrate. And that's really incredibly refreshing because we haven't had that kind of venue in a very long time. So I wish Bentkey the best. I know my kids will be watching it for a long time to come. Thank you for listening to Catholic Cinema Crusade, and I hope you have a great day.